Okay, so now that we've talked about, consulting,
Okay.
knowing what you want to ask, knowing what the end goal is for drafting the document, what exactly should be the content of this
Of this
document?
plan,
Yes,
of the
the plan.
plan. So let's put it this way. It helps to know yourself.
Okay.
Hello and welcome to Impact Bureau, a unique podcast brought to you by Mayan Organization. Impact Bureau is designed for NGO leaders, executives, founders, members, and trustees. Think of us on Impact Bureau as your unincorporated trustees who give you real advice that you wish your real board coulda, woulda, shoulda. Hi, friends. Thanks for joining us and welcome back to another episode of your favorite podcast, Impact Bureau.
It's so good to be here again.
Yes, and my name is still Edem, and this, of course, is
Mo.
the delectable Mo. We're excited to be back with you, and we have another very interesting topic that we'll be delving into in today's episode.
Yeah.
It's for you, dear NGO founder, executive, and leader. So sit back, thanks for subscribing, and just enjoy the ride.
As you know, we always have very important topics that we share on this podcast, and that's what makes us unique. So today we are going to be discussing with you how to draft a strategy plan. A strategy plan is just like a business plan, and if you've been following our previous episodes, we've discussed this time and again. We've mentioned that it is very, very critical to your starting an NGO. So, ED, what are some of the nuggets that you think we're going to be sharing about drafting a strategy plan today?
Thanks, Matura. So just like she said, I like how you likened it to a business plan, by the
Yeah.
way, because nobody really starts a business without having that
Plan.
plan. But I noticed that for a lot of NGO founders and executives, when you interact with them, they don't have it.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes they've been running for like 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
So we're going to be talking today about things like what is it?
Mm-hmm.
Why should you have it?
Yeah.
What's the process like to developing one?
Mm-hmm.
And then what are the
What makes it
essentials?
compelling?
What should be in it that gives you a solid chance of, being effective in reaching your goals?
Yeah, I feel like one of the factors that might contribute to why some NGOs start out without a strategy plan is because a lot of founders just start their NGOs because they just want to do good. So they really don't know the business side of it. They don't know that it's a proper work, it's a proper business. It's something you should actually structure.
Yeah.
So as we go on today's episode, we are going to be learning how to actually draft yours. If you don't have one already, and if you don't know how to draft it, or if you've never even heard about a strategy document before, so stay tuned. Okay, so Iji, what was it like for you starting out? Did you have everything figured out? Was your strategy plan ready?
Strategy plan. It's like what you said, you were so correct, Muturayo, because I mean, like we've already alluded to in some of our previous episodes, it's that, passion, that thing you're passionate
Just want
about.
to do good.
You just, you feel like, hey, I'm going to be the next Messiah. I'm going to solve that thing in that community. And oftentimes that project-based approach prevents you from having a sort of sustainability orientation or a hair plan. And it's from the very notion of keeping it sustainable that you begin to think of a long-term strategy or even just being more effective, that makes you think of a strategy. But because of how we often start out, we want to solve that problem. And many times we don't consult. Many times we don't have a guide or a mentor. And many times we don't walk into, there's no ready available resource, organization, office, or, portal, that will give you the guidance. And that's why we're solving that gap by setting up this Impact Bureau. So I also was like many founders. I didn't have a concrete plan. I only had a project plan. I had a plan for that specific activity, how to implement it. But when you're thinking about organizational strategy, I was also, one of the guilty ones, I admit.
So at what point do you think a lot of NGOs even come to realize that they are supposed to have a strategy document?
Because as you go along, you're just making errors. You just realize you're revolving in a circle. And, I think that the research tells us many organizations, from inception don't survive 5 years. So the mortality rate for the average NGO in Nigeria and many other parts of Africa tends to be. You don't want to create an organization to just live for 3 years. You want it to endure. But we find that it doesn't often endure. It usually is more, it dies within a lifespan of 5 years. And that's because there was no concrete plan on the ground that took into consideration all the opportunities, the threats, the weaknesses, what to leverage, how to reach that direction, that goal. So this is what we'll be sort of focusing on. Yeah.
Wow. So stay tuned, guys. And I really think that if this were to be one of CAC's requirements, a lot of NGOs would actually sit up. They will know it's a requirement, and then they'll be forced to actually go through the rigor of structuring their organization on paper before they even
you will start a riot if you start telling people that for the regulator to register you, you need to show him or her evidence of how long you will last, because your strategy plan is basically the plan to achieve your goals, achieve the objective of the organization, and to last doing that. Maybe that's not necessarily the incorporator's goal. The incorporator just wants to be sure that you have a purpose to be born. Hopefully, and everything is a risk. Even people with a strong strategy plan may not achieve it. Some major shocks might come up that might change. But I feel like you have a point. What if there was something that incentivized?
Similar to that.
Yes. What if there was something that incentivized it? Maybe they don't need to make it a mandate to register you, but maybe they need to put it as a guidance note that you should have this. Yeah.
Okay. So what is a strategy plan? Let's even start with that.
Okay. And I hate to sound academic, but for some things like this, you do have to. I call it a management tool.
Okay.
It's really a management tool because it's basically that process, and that tool, that exercise that you carry out, and the outcome of that exercise is the document, the strategy itself, that guarantees or to a large extent assures that you will be effective in achieving the goals and objectives that were spelt out from the very beginning.
So it's more like your blueprint.
Yes. Okay. The same way the architect that wants, or the person who wants to build a house starts out with that blueprint. The person who wants to run a business develops a business plan. You that wants to run an organization to achieve ABC, you have to have that plan to say, okay, this is what and what and what I will do to get me there.
Why is it important?
So it's critical because, let me use 4 reasons. Okay. The first, you need to have a direction. And no, the direction is not the vision and the mission. That's like the broad overarching, parameter, or I don't know, space.
Map that gets you to
Thank you. So now, what direction? So for instance, if I'm a new organization, perhaps my focus or the direction for my strategy that period might be, I even just want to set up an institution. Maybe the first 3 years would be about organizational development. Okay. So I want to build a team. I want to get an address and a space and create an administrative secretariat. I want to have 1 or 2 partnerships. So it's organizational development. At another level, maybe your direction might be impact. I've set up the basics, the foundations. I want to now go and roll out impact. For some other people, sometimes you see a bank and their strategy for that quarter is growth. Yeah. Sometimes another, person's strategy is acceleration, so it sets direction. Let's establish that. Okay. Secondly, the world you live in is changing. It's not fixed. It's often dynamic, so the things you predicted as your surrounding factors, they are changing. That means you have to have a strategy for that. And that's a basic, yes, because if life is, the only constant in life is change, then you with your vision spelled out, your goals and nice little, objectives spelled out, have to be aware that I must have a strategy that navigates the changing world that I'm in. Next thing I'll say as an essential is, you have these lofty dreams, these great goals that you spelled out, but you are just like everybody else in the world. You have limited resources. You exist in a world of scarce resources. It therefore means that this lofty thing I want to attain, with this level of resources I have, what is the most effective way to leverage what I currently have to attain that big grand objective? It's only a strategy that can answer that question. So I want to score 18 goals and I have only 9 players or 8 players. How am I going to field my players or my actors or to reach my 18 goals? Thank you. Which brings me to the last part. You're not the only one doing this thing. There are competitors or there are collaborators. The point is there are other people in the space. What makes you unique? That has to be contained in your strategy. So those are the 4 reasons why you have to sit down and answer those questions and lead you to an answer.
Okay, so what should the process be when you want to develop your strategy?
Thank you. So I think one of the first things I learned was that no man is an island. Don't fall into the temptation to develop your strategy alone.
Isolation.
Yes. You need brilliant minds sitting with you, thinking with you, and raising ideas with you. So I think the first thing I would recommend is that identify some critical individuals, members of your board, friends, people who've been in that space, mentors, whatever, and then invite them into that thinking space, your think tank process, your ideation process, and convene them. Yes, have a structured time when you meet, have a specific number of meetings you want to have with specific number of questions you want them to help you think through together. So that is my first recommendation for the process of building a strategy. Have a team of people, of important minds that you need to reflect on these critical questions, and then organize them around a schedule so that you can meet with them and hear their thoughts and perspectives, and you'll be recording all everybody's joint insights. The next thing I would say is that is very important is please have the right. So, and that will take us to the next part, which is what should you be reflecting on? So that you don't gather these people and at the end of the process, you realize that you really didn't even delve into important subjects. So you need to also beforehand set the agenda for the process of the strategy. What key questions must be reflected on, yes, in coming up with or in arriving at your strategy towards the end goal? And everything begins, so this is a case of walking back from the answer towards the question, right? You have an objective, you have a goal. It helps to already have that vision, mission statement. It's from that vision, mission statement that you've broken down some specific objectives for each season. Now, you begin to ask yourself, okay, and this is now going to lead us to the next, element of what should be in our strategy. What should our strategy be answering? Because you will then be building backwards to say, to reach there, what building blocks must I put in place? What do I need to know? What do I need to have? What do I need to answer? So, one, the people around you. Two, the agenda. Please frame very carefully the agenda for those people to reflect on, and don't do it alone. In fact, even in framing the agenda, you can still consult before the consultation. So have those two things sorted out, and then you kickstart your strategy process.
Okay, so now that we've talked about consulting, knowing what you want to ask, knowing what the end goal is for drafting the document, what exactly should be the content of this
plan? So let's put it this way. It helps to know yourself. So the first thing I would say is, I would want a background, because remember, it's a management tool. You're going to be managing all the resources at your disposal, and that involves people, material, everything, including yourself. So who are you? So we would need some background information. You need to put that in the strategy plan. It helps us to know, this organization, a brief history. We were set up.
Who am I as an organization or as
an organization? So the plan is for the organization. Thank you. Yes, but the plan is for that organization. So who am I is in the context of your organization. I was established. The name of this organization is blah blah blah. We were established or registered in so and so. Give us a brief history. It helps. It's even useful for you, so that God forbid you forget. You will remember where you started from. So do that. Also, your vision, your mission, these are essentials, because roughly these are the fixed parts of your strategy that maybe they don't really change as frequently as other parts of your strategy.
Because even as more persons come into your organization, or even donors, as much as they need to interact with your plan, they have some sort of history or background.
They need to, exactly. Because it's a management tool. You are not the only one referencing it. Your team members will be using it. The board members, the critical stakeholders with whom you engage will be referencing it. Imagine working with a set of people, and every day is you that have to be telling them, thank you. The first thing you do is give them this document, let them familiarize themselves with it. Then they know after reading those foundational elements or parts, they then look at the strategy you're executing for this period, right? So these are the basic foundational introductory things that you will capture. You will tell us about the organization, its history, its vision, its mission, its theory of change, and its values, its maybe the specific objectives that it derived out of those, out of that mission statement. Maybe the objective was to then improve literacy in rural communities. You would have spelled out your objectives, or the objectives was to support smallholder farmers with blah 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 during to avoid post-harvest losses. So you would have spelled out your objectives. You would also capture things like maybe a small statement of the problem, maybe the context information, or especially if you're operating in a region, in a country, or in a state.
What's the context?
Thank you. You would give us some background to that area so that we are aware of, the complexities or the realities of life in that area that birthed.
It even makes sense because by the time you are preparing your solution, you know why.
We would derive the meaning from that brief context. Yes. So that's also something that, for the introductory part, you would capture in the strategy plan. And then moving on from there, you would then, it would be important for you to, what would be the next thing I would put? I would like to know, or it would be good for me to have maybe an overview of my existing programs, or just a summary of the interventions or programs. You've already captured your theory of change / your logic model, or your developmental logic. You could put all those things again in your introduction. We believe that if 1, 2, 3 things occur, or this organization was established on the thinking that if these steps are taken, this and that. So having said that, you're now moving on to an introduction of the kind of programs we've been doing, or with the first set of programs we sort of, based on the needs assessment, we then designed as our maybe flagship programs. So just a slight overview. Then that might take us to what we would call the SWOT. Let's go into the SWOT.
And at what point do you put your organogram?
Good. All those things will be in your introduction, because it still helps me or you or even your team members to understand how this organization is structured. And the structure is not only from the governing side to also the operational side. So we would see how it's structured from corporate governance side. The board. This is how we report to and answer to. And then in terms of deploying or operating, this is how we operate. So all those things could be captured in your. These are all preliminaries that help us know you, or help you know yourself, right? And then we now move to a display of what we have to offer the world. And so that's where I talk about an overview of your programmatic offerings or your interventions, whether it's research, whatever your strategic, offerings are, you state it, right? And then we now go into, because it's a strategy, you need to examine, or if you are just starting out. So the assumption is for somebody that's doing an overview of programs is that have they already been existing? What if I'm just starting out? So I'm asking what question might be on your mind. So that overview of programs might be your proposed set of projects or proposed set of interventions. The next thing you would naturally have to do next would be an assessment, some examination of where you are currently standing by way of, the strengths and that analysis that tells us how well poised are you to deliver on those targeted programs. So it would lead us to, in management steps or theories, these are condensed ways to do that. The SWOT analysis is one of the easiest things we do in the nonprofit world, because you just break it down into these 4 categories. One, you would assess your current strengths. Next, you would assess your weaknesses. Then we will then look at the opportunities and threats in the context in which you exist, right? So let's say you were looking at strengths and weaknesses. From what parameters should you look at strengths and weaknesses? And this is where I invite people. I say we have a whole set of tools, organizational tools to guide you, because what strength am I looking? Am I just looking at the strengths of the staff I have? Am I just looking at the strength of the funds? Thank you. So what are the things you should cover when you're looking at strengths? Strengths around what areas? So there's some, we can guide you on that, but you need to be able to reflect very broadly on your strengths. Do you have partners? Do you have a good board that is going to, support you, guide you, counsel you, and, contribute to your work? Do you have, maybe some donor that has already committed at the beginning some level of resources? Do you have maybe skills? What skills do you have? Maybe you yourself, the founder, you have a level of knowledge and skill in an area, and that's the first strength.
For now.
Yes. So these are examples of the things you will cover in your strength analysis.
Okay, so apart from your SWOT analysis, what would be next?
No, so let's see. We can't just rush that SWOT. Let me break it down. No. That one is I'm dealing with your strategy plan. Okay. And I want to just focus on basics, right? The pestle is what we do in general, even for us as an organization, when we're trying to when we're looking more at sustainability, we're looking at political threats, we're looking at environmental threats. So that takes us into the domain of the sustainable, but let's look at your strategy first. Yes. Let me just walk you through a SWOT analysis.
Okay.
So you've examined your strengths. You're also, now the same questions you asked with respect to your strengths, you would ask it, yes, to your weaknesses. So how many people do you have, for instance, depending on the objectives you want to achieve, how many people do you need? So you will know what you need and you know what you have. Thank you. How much is the budget that you need to implement those 3 programs or 5 programs or 1 program?
So
what do you have?
Like a reality check.
Yes, it's a reality check along certain important yardsticks. Then let's move to opportunities. Remember, we said one of the reasons why you're doing this is because you exist in a context that is dynamic and changing. So the opportunity and threat analysis helps you to really assess your external environment. What are the opportunities there? Did the government recently introduce a policy that you could ride as a wave that favors this? Yes. Maybe, for instance, just yesterday, I read that the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation is releasing, resources to something around mental health. Wow. They're deploying over $250 million across the world to support initiatives around mental health.
So that means organizations that work around that area.
So that's something that from a policy perspective is indicative of a favorable wave now. If you position yourself well, there's a donor out there who believes in the importance of your mission statement, your objective, and so you can strategically lean in on that. So the question would be, how do you gain the attention of that particular funder? That's a strategy. But the point is that in that external environment, it's favorable. It presents an opportunity. You would also look at things like technology. Maybe before, things that you needed to go to BCOS and Channels TV to do. Now you can set up your phone and just communicate through your, through a YouTube channel like we are doing. And you're disseminating and reaching a very wide audience. So how does technology represent an opportunity for you, given your mission and objectives? These are opportunities you can examine. Now, threats. Similarly, you look again at those yardsticks. Are there policy threats in your environment? For instance, look at one of our programs. We do a digital literacy program that goes to schools. It's mobile. But yes, the economic recession and the fuel crisis in the country is a shock that has affected our ability to implement the project. So that's coming from the external environment. If we had been sensitive to things like, the Ukraine war and some of these things that were happening at a global level, we might have been better prepared. We might have redesigned our program ahead to be deployed digitally. But that may limit the kinds of audiences students we can reach, but we would have been prepared for a hybrid model. So these are examples of how you examine the external environment to see how it's going to either elevate or dampen your work.
We talk about context analysis, SWOT analysis, your programmatic focus, organic, even developing an organic brand.
Yes.
And headache for some people.
Yes.
So I feel like we are still supposed to do like some sort of breaking down. But let's even flow with the ride. Okay. So is it supposed to end at SWOT analysis?
No, and something I omitted to mention, which I have to stress, is that so you said, assuming in the strategy you've already outlined the overview of either proposed programs or existing programs that you're working on. It's always critical in your strategy to then map out what is my approach. In fact, what is my strategy? So that program, remember, you've done your strengths, your weaknesses, and you've already told me what programs or interventions or outcomes you shall want to realize in the time frame of that strategy document. So what approach are you going to be using?
More like, how do you want to go about achieving?
Yes, the how. The approach answers the question how. So some people might say, okay, I'm going to use collaboration and partnerships as my approach. I'm going to collaborate with NYSC to use corpers across the 36 states of the country to go into rural communities as extension workers to teach farmers. So my collaborative approach is the only way that, given my small resources, I'll be able to still reach the entire country and provide this information to a huge number of farmers. So one, that is the first strategy. Another person might say, okay, my strategy is going to be to use digital. I cannot reasonably go to deliver sensitization programs to so many. I'm going to create a radio program or an online podcast, and I'm going to be sensitizing on mental health, or I'm going to be sending out what do you call it, newsletter, or I'm going to be sending out text messages and what's that thing in the morning? Yes, WhatsApp messages, just to sensitize people around mental health issues weekly. So I will gather phone contacts of all maybe tertiary students registered in former tertiary institutions, and I'll be sending yes, as a way to address mental health issues, create awareness, fight stigma, what do you call it, encourage visits to and referrals to trained psychiatrists, or yes, referrals or medical practitioners and experts, so that might be your own approach to addressing mental health challenges that you've identified in that context. So your strategy or your how is going to be determined by the SWOT analysis you did, and then the goals or objectives or layout of programs you claim you want to achieve. So it's now the roadmap to getting you there. So the strategy is going to become that roadmap. In this case, I'm going to leverage a partnership with 50 NGOs or 50 schools. Another one is going to say, I'm going to simply use a podcast as my way of dissemination. And that one might decide. So it's all going to be dependent on the available strengths, weaknesses, whether it's covering your resources, your physical, your manpower, whatever it is. So that has to be covered. And then I'll also quickly wrap up and say that it's important for you to tell us things like, your team. How many people? You do an assessment of what you currently have. I have 3 fixed staff, and then a network of or a cohort of 13 volunteers, and maybe we also have 3 consultants. So you can outline that also in your strategic plan, so that new people joining your organization know where you are currently at. And it's important to also know your competitive edge. Remember, like I said, you're not the only one doing this thing. So you yourself, you need to find out, what is my unique proposition? What's my unique value? What's the unique thing that I have? For you, the unique thing that you might have is that you are a group of, all of you are trained children psychologists. So in the aspect of adolescent mental health, everybody in your team is a trained child psychologist. And so so maybe that's your differentiation. Yes, that's your unique value proposition, that everybody here is skilled enough to, maybe anchor the program. So that might be it.
Okay, so there you have it, guys. It's really been a lot of learning. We've been able to learn what the strategy document is, why it's important, and we've learned about some of the components of a strategy document. But this is a lot, and I know that you have a lot of questions, right? If I'm speaking your mind, please come back next week, because this particular episode is still going to continue by next week. So we're still going to be dwelling on some of these conversations. We'll take a deep dive into how you practically, come up with your context analysis, mission, vision statement, all those things that, we mentioned in today's podcast. So we hope to see you next week.
Thank you so much for joining us. We can't do this without you. And again, we enjoyed ourselves. So we hope you did enjoy listening also. Looking forward to seeing you next week on the same episode of Impact Bureau.